So I'm delighted to be here this morning. You know, when I look around the room, and after 2 months at the university, I feel of all the things I'm doing, I really feel the weight and the excitement and the history of being part of the John Ben Shepherd Leadership Institute. And that really came home in all, as my kids would say, in my jellies, my feels. Last night, when I'm sitting in the Bob Bullock Museum, the Rotunda, and we're talking about Texas history, and we're talking about the future of Texas, and we're talking about what matters most. And I hope, did you feel it? Did you feel it? I mean, those speakers were inspiring, and we were in that place, in that time, and I really felt that. And the John Ben Shepherd Institute has a long and storied history, and I'm so proud to be the executive director of the Institute, especially because so many prior staff and directors are here with us this weekend. I love what it says about this Institute, that the people that get involved in this work stay involved with it for decades. What does that tell you about what people believed and knew about John Ben, the way that he led, and the commitment to his legacy here in Texas? So I want to thank those prior directors and staff who are in the room: Dwayne Leach, Jack Ladd, Bobby Burns, Bob Rashia, Charles Cotton, and others. You know, the John Ben Shepherd Institute was founded to advance public leadership, inspired by General Shepherd's example of public service to the state of Texas on the local and state level. In the more than 30 years since, the JBS Institute has expressed this commitment through a wide variety of programs like the Distinguished Lecture Series, the Shepherd Edge, and of course the Crisis Leadership Program, and of course this event, the Texas Leadership Forum. But during this time, that expression has changed. It's changed along with what the needs of Texas have been and what we believe they're going to be. And so as we continue to evolve, we want to bring with us into the future the legacy and lessons of John Ben Shepherd. That's my job, to think about what that looks like. And of course, I'll have a lot of help from those on the JBS Advisory Board, you here in this room, our students, and our partners. So there's a call for leadership for all of us. You know, one of my favorite mentors once said to me, if you want to be a leader, you have to get comfortable with feeling different. You have to get comfortable with feeling different. You're different. Do you know why? Because you were up at 7:30 on a Saturday, voluntarily. How is that unusual for you? Yeah, it's very unusual. You know, we often think of leadership in these grandiose terms, right? Sometimes I do too. I'm wired to feel like my life has to matter because I've made a difference. But the reality is that it's often not the large decisions of our lives that really shape the trajectory, but rather the 100 small decisions that you make every single day. Like whether you keep the commitment that you had, whether you wake up at 7:30 in the morning to hear a speaker and go to the Capitol and spend your day. There are many of your peers who are doing something else today. But you're doing something. You're living out your values and your commitments. And that says something about you. And when you do that over and over and over again, it becomes a habit and a practice. And that practice becomes your character. And that character becomes who you really are. And that's the call to leadership that we desperately need. We have always known that there's a need for leaders and leadership, but what's different today is the way we will identify, train, and nurture leadership and the outcomes of leadership. You know, early on, those scholars of leadership, you know, the early theories were the great man theory of leadership. Anybody know that one? I know you do, Charles Cotton. The great man theory, right? This idea that great men were born. Right? We just waited for them to be born and then hoped we could identify them, right? And then we decided maybe that wasn't so good. And so then we came up with something there, not yet. We're waiting for it. Then we talked about trait theories of leadership, right? And we studied. So like if you were tall, Also if you were male, and if you had a commanding voice, if your voice was lower than normal. These were traits, right? And if you had these traits, you were a leader. Well, today, nobody really ascribes to those leadership theories, at least not verbally. They do in their head still, right? We have a picture of what a leader looks like. And probably it's not what I look like. And probably it's not what you look like. But guess who's leading Texas? So how do we think about that? My own leadership journey just started just down the road from here. I was born at St. David's Hospital. It's just 1.5 miles from here. And the great woman theory should have been born. And so, my mother is a first-generation American. And she met my father when his ship docked in Chicago. He was in the Navy. That's how she ended up in Texas, God bless her. Her father was a bus driver for the Chicago Transit Authority. He died, unfortunately, of a coronary embolism when he was in his early 40s. My mother's the oldest of 6 children, and they all went into foster care at that point. They were split up, and the youngest 2 were adopted by other families, and the children were split up across other foster homes. My mom barely finished high school. She certainly was bright enough to go to college, but there was no opportunity for her to do so. She married my father. They ended up in Texas. My parents didn't have much. I always say they had very little when they were together. After they divorced, they had nothing. And so, but the reality is I was born, and when I did my dissertation, I put it in the context of 1972 to the present, and I looked at women in leadership. And I chose that date for a variety of reasons. It's when I was born. That's actually not why I chose it, but I chose it because it was the year that Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1972 was passed. And if I was to ask most of you what Title IX is about, you might say parity in athletics, right? Some of you might say it's about sexual assault because that's how the law has expressed itself in recent years. But the reality is it's a law really regarding avoiding discrimination on the basis of sex. But in 1972 in Texas, a woman could not own property on her own. She could not have a checking account in her own name or open a credit card. If she was a teacher and she became pregnant, she could be fired from her job, even if she was married. Until 1967, employer could choose not to hire a woman without consulting her husband first. These are not that long ago. I mean, how young do I look? Pretty young. Most of you were doing the math when I said I was born in 1972. I'm 47. And so I'll help you out. It's early. So change is slow, even when laws are passed. Because what I experienced in 1972, being born and growing up in Texas, was that leaders didn't look like me. Leadership was not for me. It was for somebody else. I grew up when the Austin airport was a military base, that's where I lived, on McQuirk Street. And so between being a woman in that time in Texas and living on a military base, it was pretty clear to me that leadership was not for me. I didn't look like any of the leaders that were around me. So why does that matter? It matters because you don't have to know much about demographics to know that you're the future. You're the future. Texas is moving in a different way demographically. And in the UT system at UT Austin and at UTPB, we're talking about a majority-minority population in our college campuses. More women than men go to college across the country. More first-generation students, more students Pell eligible, more students with demonstrated financial need. This is who is coming to college. What does it look like to raise up, to train, to mentor, and to advise leaders who are coming and looking very different than the way society has thought about leaders? So who will lead Texas in the next 50 years? You will. And my job and our job is to make sure that we're helping you have the tools necessary to be successful. And to do so, you've got to learn from the past. And we've got to take the lessons of leaders like John Ben Shepherd and bring them with us into the future. So there are 3 ways that I believe our work will come alive in the next season of the history of the JBS Institute. First and foremost, we have a continued and ongoing commitment to developing leaders and leadership. We'll be leading through service and civic engagement. And we'll be talking about advancing career development and experiences at the same time. Because today's students, they're worried about their futures. They're worried if college is going to be enough for them to be successful. They don't believe, and none of the data says, that that's enough anymore. What we know is that if you graduate from college, there's an absolute financial difference in your life, right? But in terms of figuring out how to make meaning of your gifts and skills, how to apply them in the world, and how to feel like you can have a secure future, is that on your mind, students? Are you worried about it? Yeah, you are. I see all of you nodding. I see it in your eyes. You look scared. And so what we know is I'm glad you're in college, and I know you're studying important fields. And at UTPB, we have so many majors where there are no doubt jobs and job security ahead. And yet, over the course of your life, our economies will change, our world will change, and our technology will change. So how do we develop leaders who will lead through those changes? So developing leaders and leadership, we will do that in a variety of ways. And here are just some of the things that we're already doing or that I'm thinking about and using today as an opportunity to talk to you about that. And I hope you'll give me feedback. Yes, I like that idea. Yes, I want to do that. I don't know about that one. Number 3 was a little bit not too sure about. But we have a distinguished lecture series, and we'd like to continue to use those high-profile speakers, bringing them to the Permian Basin to discuss leadership, to help inspire us, and to connect our communities through common experiences. I'm interested in launching a policymakers breakfast, where we can bring business leaders together to hear from high-caliber, well-known business speakers, strategists, public and government leaders, so that we can have conversation together. By the way, all of these events will include special opportunities for students, because that's where our heart is. The development of a West Texas Young Leaders program that will help us reach into the rapidly growing Midland-Odessa area to serve as an anchor for leadership development for future public servants and leaders of private enterprise in West Texas. We have resources that we can use to develop our local students in high school and create pathways to their future. We can develop leadership fellow programs for our current students at UTPB, designed to help them strengthen and impact and learn about themselves, their communities, the world, and teach them how to go out and be leaders, not just by learning theory, but by developing and experiencing things and practices that will help them grow their skills and make them more attractive to employers, not just in their first job, but in their 5th job. We'll have a commitment to service and civic engagement. The JBS Institute has always had a commitment to public service. From a time when coordinators went out around Texas teaching leaders and leadership skills to high school and college students, the Institute has believed in serving the community. Our foundational documents as a university highlight our commitment to thinking large and living local. So the university is clearly committed to serving the region. Many of our students and programs already volunteer in the community, but we have an opportunity to serve our region even better by centralizing our volunteer and service opportunities so students can more easily find out the needs of our community and connect their gifts, talents, and time to the community. We can connect that with learning and meaning-making experiences so that the experience, while fulfilling enough if you simply volunteer, becomes service once you actually learn to apply meaning to it and you connect it to the things you've learned in class. We can help students do that through the development of portfolios and co-curricular transcripts that will help them document their experiences and share them with graduate schools and with employers. Things like the Archer Fellowship, which we have because we're part of the wonderful UT system, which brings highly motivated and accomplished students to Washington, D.C. to participate in internships and take classes on policy, economics, and persuasion. The Archer Center works with organizations like the United Nations, the U.S. Department of State, the Gates Foundation, just a few small players in the future of what's happening in the world. So we have incredible opportunities to be committed to the exploration and career exploration and experiences of our students through service and civic engagement, and all the while developing leaders in leadership. That's at the heart of what the JBS Institute has done all of its time of existence. It's connected deeply to the work of John Ben Shepherd himself, but it brings us into the future. and helps us meet students where they are, as well as connect more vibrantly to our West Texas community and across the state. I look forward to working with each of you as we look to develop this vision further and to have you all participate in some of these ideas